Not to be confused with the B-horror classic Motel Hell, Shudder's Hell Motel is arriving. It's a weekly episodic horror limited series with mystery and gore. So, should you check in and give it a go, or should you keep driving and skip this one altogether? Please don't unsubscribe. A group of 10 true crime obsessives is invited to the opening weekend of the newly renovated Cold River Motel, the site of a 30-year-old unsolved satanic mass murder. Unfortunately for them, history repeats itself when the guests get stranded and start getting knocked off one by one during a murder spree that grows exponentially more gruesome with each kill. The series kicks off with a bang that shows us exactly why the Cold River Motel became infamous. Then we jump 30 years into the future to really the present, and we get to watch a varied group of true crime influencers and enthusiasts attend the grand reopening of the iconic location of death. I wasn't instantly endeared with the group. While a couple of them weren't outright obnoxious or even off-putting, the majority are exactly what you'd expect from inflated egos ghoulishly living vicariously through the death and dismemberment of others. But that's not the only reason they're unlikable. I mean, they come across as pretentious, but could be hiding more, just simply because there isn't a great deal of development that's provided. Now, we are given some cursory background that informs if they're a podcaster, maybe an artist, an actress, even somebody who just expresses hybristophilia. Now, I had to look that one up, but it's people who are attracted to criminals and typically violent ones like murderers. So yeah, that's the group of people that we get to spend some time with. The group find themselves stranded at the motel, which turns dire once guests start dying in heinous and grotesque ways. And thanks to the limited number of people at the motel, the numbers decrease rapidly. And the show itself, it's a bit cheesy. I mean, the acting is mainly over the top and bordering very heavily on the B side of the genre. But within some of that, the story knows what it is, and then shapes the dialogue to lean into some of the more campy or even silly ideas. And because the characters weren't really enveloping me from an endearing status, I wasn't overly concerned for their safety. But because the kills we watch are pretty nasty, I actually look forward to their demise rather than dreaded it. But something that surprised me along the way was how invested I became in the mystery. I mean, we're shown some clues with one surprise happening fairly early on in the show, but it works to then cast a lot more doubt on who could be responsible for this new string of murders. The isolated and contained location also works to establish a sinister atmosphere, not only because murders did and are occurring there, but also because there's no realistic way of escape. But working against that, there is a lot of dramatic back and forth, which ends up only adding time rather than meaningful dialogue or content. Now, the pacing for each episode, it has its tense moments. There's dread that's built up, and also some fun visual teases that come from watching a following perspective on the killer. We can see as the killer peers and spies on its targets, raising intrigue and then some discomfort. I mean, I was never scared or even creeped out, but I don't think that was the goal anyway. I mean, the ominous atmosphere, it's established and then maintained through some wonderfully creative moments of murder. And there were multiple times throughout the episodes where my interest did dip just because the show, it fell into those familiar dramatic tropes of characters yelling and blaming each other while never really accomplishing anything. Then there's also the scheming and the dealings where it feels like a really dark episode of a reality game show. I mean, these aren't bad on their own, but thanks to their overuse, they detracted from the overall enjoyment. And a couple of the characters, they also come across way more melodramatic than I think is necessary. I mean, there's one dude who's this sort of spiritualist, and his condescension, coupled with a haughty and overly confident demeanor, just made him more of a joke to watch than anyone who could handle the chaos that was erupting around the motel and all the bravado that he was giving off. Now, the one character that did make sense to be theatrical was the actress. She was a slasher queen and lived for the spotlight. So in most of her interactions with the rest of the group, she's just extra, which works to also add intrigue and doubt to her. I mean, was she truly scared, or was it all an act as she brutally chopped up the other guests? And despite the majority of the characters being emotionally damaged or maybe fragile in one way or another, most were still very difficult to sympathize with. By the end, I was wishing the storytelling was faster, especially because there are certain elements we're made privy to that help to inform a set of motives. But the main mystery of who's offing the influencers, that's held very close to the vest. Now, the visual effects are impressively executed. The use of prosthetics and makeup just crafted some imagery that is full of ick. I mean, like in the first 2 episodes, we get to watch somebody die in a pretty gnarly way. But then when the aftermath is left to deal with, this is when the true nastiness kicks in. And for as cheesy or maybe unconvincing as some of the acting is, these grotesque elements of gore are a spectacular addition to the series. And these type of nasty displays, they're splattered throughout the show. Yeah, pun intended. But while the storytelling is somewhat uneven, this is a solid mystery that's complemented by carnage. I didn't guess the ending, but with that, the finale is somewhat lackluster, especially given all the savagery that we witnessed leading up to the final episode. The end does provide closure, but it came about in a neat and tidy way, giving us the final exposition that reveals all while also not being terribly interesting. And for as much as I had been invested in the mystery aspect of this show, it ends up being just meh as a resolution. I mean, the weekly release, I think it's a bit much to ask, as the progression is slow and it's repetitive, filled with unnecessary dramatic padding that doesn't increase the tension or the quality of the story. I mean, if you're gonna check this out, the barbaric and cruel kills are the reason to watch. Made all the more visceral and gross just thanks to expertly crafted practical effects. This had its moments and did keep me entertained with the intrigue and gore, but it fell short in the final execution and could have been a stellar series had the writing been tighter and the pacing more efficient. There's sex, no nudity, a lot of profanity, and a ton of gruesome violence. I give Hell Motel 3 out of 5 couches. Alright, what's something gory you like to watch? And don't come at me with martyrs, I've already seen that. I prefer Inside more, to be honest. And I'm not watching a Serbian film either. Outside of those, what are some recommendations do you have for me? I would love to see them in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.